Last night, I 28, female went out to dinner with a close friend of mine, someone I've known for years and genuinely care about. Let me give you some background first so you understand why things unfolded the way they did. She and I have always had a good relationship, or at least I thought we did, but there has been one ongoing issue that started to chip away at my patience over time. She has this habit, no, a pattern, of conveniently forgetting her wallet whenever we go out. It doesn't happen every single time, but it happens often enough that I've started to feel like I'm being taken advantage of. At first, I let it slide because, you know, friends help each other out. I figured it was an honest mistake. Everyone forgets things now and then, right? But over time, it became clear that this was more of a routine for her. She'd do the same little act every time, patting her pockets, rummaging through her purse, feigning surprise, and exclaiming, "Oh no! I can't believe I forgot my wallet." It always seemed just a little too rehearsed. At first, I laughed it off, pulling out my card to cover the bill. But the more it happened, the more it started to bother me. She never offered to pay me back, and she never insisted on covering the bill the next time to even things out. It felt one-sided. I started to wonder if she genuinely saw me as a friend or just as someone she could depend on to pick up the tab. I tried dropping hints. I'd make comments like, "Wow, you're really forgetful when it comes to your wallet," or, "You should put it in your purse as soon as you grab it so you don't leave it behind." But she always brushed it off with a laugh or a casual, "Yeah, I know, I'm so scatterbrained." It was frustrating. I didn't want to outright accuse her of doing it on purpose because that felt confrontational, and I value our friendship. But at the same time, I was tired of feeling like a doormat. So last night, I decided to take a different approach. I had made plans to meet her at a nice restaurant downtown, nothing super fancy, but definitely a step above our usual spots. As I was getting ready, I looked at my wallet sitting on the counter and thought, what if I just leave it here? The idea hit me like a light bulb moment. If she forgot her wallet again, this would force her to take responsibility. It wasn't about being petty, it was about setting a boundary. I was tired of enabling her behavior, and I thought this might be the wake-up call she needed. I showed up at the restaurant a few minutes early, feeling a mix of nervousness and resolve. When she arrived, she was her usual bubbly self, chatting about her day and complimenting the place I had chosen. Everything was fine, normal, even, until the check arrived. That's when things took a turn. As soon as the waiter placed the bill on the table, I saw it happen. She did her usual routine, patting her jacket pockets, digging through her purse, and letting out a dramatic, "Oh my God! I forgot my wallet. Where the hell is it?" She looked up at me with wide eyes, waiting for me to say, "Don't worry about it, I've got it," like I always do. But this time, I didn't. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Me too." For a moment, there was silence. She froze, her expression shifting from surprise to disbelief. "What do you mean, me too?" she asked, her voice a mix of confusion and panic. I shrugged, trying to keep my tone casual. "I forgot my wallet at home too. I guess we're in the same boat." Her face changed completely. She went from looking confused to looking absolutely furious. I could tell she was trying to process what was happening, but the panic was starting to set in. She glanced around the restaurant, probably wondering what to do. Finally, she hissed at me, "Are you serious right now? You're putting me on the spot like this." I stayed calm and replied, "I'm not putting you on the spot. I just thought it was funny that we both forgot our wallets." She didn't think it was funny. Not one bit. Her eyes were practically burning holes through me, and I could see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out her next move. The waiter came back to check on us, and the tension at the table was palpable. I could feel my heart racing, but I wasn't about to back down. This was exactly the kind of moment I had prepared myself for. To my relief, she ended up using Apple Pay to cover the bill. I didn't even know she had it set up on her phone, but apparently, she did. As soon as the transaction went through, she leaned back in her chair and glared at me. "I can't believe you did that," she said. "That was so humiliating." I calmly replied, "I didn't mean to humiliate you. I just thought it was time we both took responsibility for paying our share." She didn't say much after that. We left the restaurant, and the car ride home was awkward and quiet. Before she got out, she turned to me and said, "You're a horrible person for doing that to me. Friends don't embarrass each other like that." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and said, "I'll see you later." She slammed the door and walked off, leaving me sitting there feeling a mix of guilt and frustration. On one hand, I felt bad for making her feel uncomfortable. On the other hand, I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong. I wasn't trying to humiliate her, I was just trying to hold her accountable. Was that so unreasonable? Now I'm left wondering if I went too far. Maybe I should have talked to her directly about how her behavior was making me feel instead of staging this little experiment. But at the same time, I feel like I've been more than patient with her, and she's the one who created this situation by repeatedly taking advantage of me. So, was I wrong? Am I the bad guy for leaving my wallet at home to prove a point, or was this a necessary step to address an ongoing problem without confrontation? Update 1. A week after the awkward dinner, I was still replaying the night over and over in my head. I had felt justified in my actions at the time, but her angry words stayed with me. "You're a horrible person for doing that to me." Was I? Had I crossed some unspoken line of friendship by letting her fend for herself? I felt a mixture of guilt and frustration, but more than anything, I felt exhausted. I didn't know how to move forward with someone who clearly didn't value fairness in our friendship. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, she texted me. Her message was short but surprisingly heartfelt. She apologized for her reaction at dinner and said she had been feeling embarrassed and caught off guard that night. She admitted she hadn't handled it well and said she wanted to make it up to me by taking me out for dinner. It was the first time in all these years she had offered to treat me, and the sincerity in her tone gave me pause. Maybe she really had reflected on her behavior. Maybe my little experiment had finally gotten through to her. After some thought, I agreed. I didn't want to hold a grudge, and I valued our friendship enough to give her another chance. We made plans to meet at a trendy pizza place downtown, one of those Instagram-worthy spots with exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, and artisanal everything. When I arrived, she was already there, waiting at a cozy table near the window. She greeted me with a big smile and a hug, acting as though nothing had happened the week before. Her energy was warm and upbeat, and for a while, I thought maybe this dinner would mark a fresh start for us. We spent the first half of the evening catching up. She asked about my work, genuinely interested for once, and even complimented my outfit, saying I looked so put together. It was nice, comfortable, even. The tension from the previous week seemed to melt away, and I started to feel hopeful about repairing our friendship. Then the check arrived. I felt my chest tighten as the waiter placed the small leather folder on the table between us. I didn't reach for it, deciding to let her take the lead since she had been the one to invite me out. She opened it, glanced at the total, and reached into her purse. My heart was pounding in anticipation, and then it happened, the familiar pause. She froze, her hand still in her bag, and let out a soft sigh. "Ugh, you won't believe this," she said, looking up at me with a sheepish smile. "My Apple Pay isn't working, and I left my wallet at home again. Can you cover me this time? I promise I'll Venmo you as soon as I get home." I felt my stomach drop. There it was, the same old excuse, repackaged slightly but just as flimsy. After everything that had happened, she was still playing the same game. I stared at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. Inside, though, I felt a mix of disbelief and disappointment. Was she serious? Had she learned nothing? "That's weird," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You could always call the bank, or I'm sure the waiter will be okay splitting the check if you need time to sort it out." She laughed nervously, brushing off my suggestion. No, it's fine. I'll figure it out," she said, her tone casual. But I could see it, the flicker of panic in her eyes. She knew she'd been caught, even if she wouldn't admit it outright. After a moment, she excused herself to the restroom, leaving her purse on the table. As she walked away, I stared at the bag, my mind racing. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But something didn't sit right with me. Her behavior, her tone, the timing of it all, it felt calculated. The memory of all the other times she'd forgotten her wallet came flooding back, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another performance. Curiosity got the better of me. I glanced around the restaurant to make sure no one was watching, then leaned forward and peeked into her open purse. My heart sank. Sitting right there, in the side pocket of her bag, was her wallet. It wasn't hidden or tucked away, it was right there, in plain sight. The neat leather fold practically mocked me as I stared at it. All this time, I had given her the benefit of the doubt. I had told myself she was just forgetful, that maybe she was overwhelmed or distracted. But this? This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just a one-off mistake or even a bad habit. This was a conscious choice. She had looked me in the eye and lied, fully expecting me to clean up her mess yet again. And for what? To save a few bucks. To keep up some facade that she wasn't capable of pulling her own weight. When she returned to the table, she acted as though nothing had happened. She smiled, thanked me for waiting, and asked if I was ready to leave. I nodded, still trying to process what I had just seen. She didn't mention the bill again, and I didn't either. I had already made up my mind, I wasn't going to cover for her. When the waiter came back, I handed him my card and asked him to split the check. Her expression shifted, just for a moment, but she quickly covered it with a forced smile. As we left the restaurant, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. This wasn't about money, it never had been. It was about respect. And in that moment, I realized she didn't respect me, not really. Our friendship wasn't built on mutual care or understanding, it was built on convenience, hers, not mine. That night, as I sat at home replaying the evening in my mind, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because I knew I would have to distance myself from someone I had once considered a close friend. Relief because, for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for myself. I wasn't a doormat, and I wasn't going to let anyone treat me like one, not anymore. In the days that followed, I didn't hear from her. She didn't Venmo me the money she had promised, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. For all her apologies and good intentions, nothing had really changed. Update 2. Later, needing to vent and get an outside perspective, I decided to call Erica, a mutual friend who'd known Sarah even longer than I had. Erica was one of those people who always seemed to have a level head. If anyone could help me figure out whether I was being overdramatic, it was her. As soon as Erica picked up, I launched into the story, spilling all the details from the first dinner to the pizza night and the wallet discovery. I was halfway through my rant when Erica interrupted me. "Oh, she pulled that stunt with you too," she said, her tone laced with annoyance. I froze. My thoughts screeched to a halt. What did she mean, too? A knot of unease formed in my stomach as I pressed her for more details. Erica sighed heavily, as though she'd been waiting for this conversation to happen for a long time. She explained that Sarah had been pulling the same trick on her and several others in our friend group for years. It was always the same excuse: "I forgot my wallet, my card isn't working," or "Can you cover me? I'll pay you back." At first, everyone had brushed it off, much like I had. One time, sure, maybe twice, it happens. But after a while, they started noticing the pattern. Sarah never offered to pay anyone back, never insisted on footing the bill the next time, and never seemed to forget her wallet when she was out with people she wasn't as close to. It wasn't just me. Sarah had been doing this to nearly everyone in our circle. Erica went on to say that a few of the others had even talked about it in a group chat that didn't include Sarah. They had all grown tired of being put in awkward situations and feeling taken advantage of, but no one had confronted her directly. Instead, they had quietly started making excuses to avoid going out with her. At some point, Sarah must have realized people were pulling away because she started targeting newer friends, people like me, who hadn't yet caught on. Hearing all of this was like a punch to the gut. On one hand, I felt vindicated, I wasn't crazy, and it wasn't just me. On the other hand, I felt betrayed by the silence. Why hadn't anyone warned me? Why had they all chosen to tiptoe around the issue instead of addressing it head-on? Erica admitted that it wasn't because they didn't care, it was because Sarah had a way of turning any criticism into drama. She'd get defensive, play the victim, and somehow twist the situation until you felt like the bad guy for even bringing it up. It was exhausting, Erica said, and most of them had decided it was easier to just let her fade out of their lives. That explanation hit me harder than I expected. I had been sitting here questioning my own judgment, wondering if I'd overreacted or misread the situation, when in reality, Sarah had been pulling this same stunt on multiple people for years. And yet, instead of confronting her, everyone had chosen avoidance. They let her behavior continue unchecked, leaving others like me to deal with the fallout. Update 3. Fueled by everything I had learned, I realized I couldn't let this slide any longer. The weight of her actions had grown too heavy, not just for me but for everyone she had taken advantage of. If I didn't address this directly, I would only be adding to the cycle of silence that had enabled her behavior for so long. The next day, I texted Sarah, asking if she could meet me for coffee. I kept the message simple and vague, not wanting to tip her off about the conversation we were going to have. She responded quickly, agreeing to meet, and I set a time and place. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. Sarah walked in a few minutes later, her usual bubbly demeanor in full force as she waved and sat down across from me. I didn't bother with small talk. I had rehearsed what I was going to say so many times that it felt almost robotic when the words started spilling out. As I began explaining what had been bothering me, her cheerful expression faltered. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of discomfort that only deepened as I laid everything out. I told her how her repeated excuses about forgetting her wallet had become a pattern that others had noticed, not just me. I brought up the countless times she had relied on someone else to pay, never offering to make things right or acknowledging how unfair it was. I let her know that if she was struggling financially, that was something we could have worked through together, but the lying, the manipulation, and the consistent disregard for her friend's generosity weren't acceptable. As I spoke, I could feel the tension building between us. She was uncharacteristically quiet, her face a mix of embarrassment, anger, and something I couldn't quite place. When I finally finished, there was a long, uncomfortable silence. I braced myself for an explosion, some kind of denial, an accusation, or even an attempt to make herself the victim. But when she finally responded, her reaction took me by surprise. She didn't deny it. She admitted it. The truth came tumbling out, raw and defensive, like a dam breaking under pressure. She explained that she had been pretending to forget her wallet because she felt pressured to keep up with the rest of us. She talked about how expensive some of the places we chose to go were and how she didn't want to feel left out or judged for not being able to afford them. She admitted that, in her mind, letting someone else cover the bill was a way to avoid the awkwardness of saying she couldn't afford to join. She framed it as a survival mechanism, a way to protect herself from feelings of inadequacy and shame. As I listened, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I understood where she was coming from. It couldn't have been easy for her to constantly feel like she was falling behind, especially in a group where everyone else seemed to have their finances in order. On the other hand, her justification didn't excuse the hurt she had caused. It didn't make up for the years of lies, manipulation, and the sense of betrayal she had inflicted on people who genuinely cared about her. There had been countless opportunities for her to be honest, to have an open conversation about her struggles, but instead, she had chosen to take advantage of the very people she called her friends. After our conversation, I left the coffee shop feeling drained but also relieved. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but at least the truth was finally out. I had said my piece, and now it was up to her to decide how to move forward. I didn't know if she would take responsibility for her actions or if she would continue to make excuses, but either way, I felt like I had done what I could. A few days later, a group message popped up on my phone. It was from Sarah. The tone of her message was different from anything I had ever seen from her before. She started by apologizing, not just to me but to everyone in our friend group. She admitted to what she had been doing, explaining that it had started as a way to cope with her financial struggles but had spiraled into something she wasn't proud of. She acknowledged the hurt she had caused and promised to do better. She also said she understood if anyone needed space from her or didn't want to continue the friendship. What stood out most to me, though, was her promise to make amends. She said she was working on figuring out how much she owed to each person and would be reaching out individually to settle her debts. She also said she planned to take a step back from group outings until she could contribute equally without relying on others to pick up the slack. It was the kind of accountability I hadn't expected but desperately hoped for. The responses from the group were mixed. Some people were quick to forgive her, expressing their support and understanding. Others were more hesitant, saying they needed time to process everything. A few didn't respond at all. As for me, I felt cautiously optimistic. Her message felt genuine, but actions would speak louder than words. If she truly wanted to rebuild trust, it would take more than just an apology. In the weeks that followed, Sarah made an effort to follow through on her promises. She reached out to me personally, asking how much she owed me and transferring the money within hours. She also started suggesting cheaper, more low-key hangouts that didn't involve expensive dinners or outings. It was clear she was trying, and I appreciated that. But even with her efforts, things between us didn't fully go back to normal. There was a distance that hadn't been there before, a lingering sense of caution that I couldn't quite shake. I didn't doubt her sincerity, but trust once broken is hard to rebuild. Whether our friendship fully recovers remains to be seen, but for now, I'm content knowing that I stood up for myself and that the cycle of silence has finally been broken.